Netflix isn't going to die, at least not for a while. Hear me out. Back in early 2022, it seemed like Netflix was collapsing, recording its first decline of subscribers in a decade, 2 quarters in a row. Its stock plummeted because the future of its place in the streaming world looked uncertain. People were catching on to Netflix's business practices with their show cancellations, quantity over quality content, and their anti-consumer features on the horizon. The entire market had a correction from its substantial growth during the lockdown and was now looking stagnant. And almost every film YouTuber milked this situation, posting all sorts of Netflix is dying or it's over for Netflix videos, but this was all an overreaction. Yes, as much as you were licking your lips seeing Netflix struggle because they canceled one of your favorite shows, Netflix is far from over. In fact, quite the opposite. 2023 has been a pretty good year for them, laying the foundation for the remainder of the decade that should see them become much more dominant. It seems like they have the worst behind them and other streaming services are struggling more than ever. Their content strategy is very viable, especially with their approach to worldwide markets, and Netflix has shown that they can adapt when they need to. We're going to talk about all of this and more, but before we dive in, we just want to let you know that we aren't supporters of the way Netflix has been running things lately. We just think that this next decade will be very good for them, at least in the business sense. We're really hoping that the industry will improve for us, the consumer, but we're not holding our breaths on that. So let's get into it. Netflix already saw things turn around in the latter half of 2022. Their stock slowly began to climb again because of their subscriber growth, especially in Q4. Even with the rough start to the year, they still managed to earn billions in profit, being the only service without major losses. And this is one of the things Netflix has going for them. They are the market leader and have an established and sustainable business model while everyone else is just playing catch up. Their competitors such as Warner Bros. Discovery, NBC Universal, and Paramount Global are still making most of their money from a declining business, linear TV. Their profits from cable networks are being sunk into future-proofing their streaming services with billions of dollars lost each year, but the streaming model they've set up is not yet viable. This goes for Disney Plus as well, but instead they are using their film profits. Everyone is now looking for ways to increase revenue and cut costs. This is the turning point of the streaming wars that goes in favor of Netflix. Netflix was way ahead of the curve when they made the first video-on-demand streaming service, but they still carry this innovative mentality, knowing ahead of time when changes will be needed, like the need for producing original content back in 2012, many years before the streaming wars where they lost a lot of the licenses to third-party content. This mindset was pivotal in making their service sustainable, but by being the first to really focus on increasing profits, it's caused a lot of negative press to focus on them. All of the negativity culminated in Netflix's low point in 2022 when people had enough of the cancellations, mediocre content, price hikes, and on top of all that, the password sharing restrictions announcement. But now, with every other streamer needing to make similar changes, the public's opinion of Netflix is starting to improve once again. With billions of dollars spent trying to catch up to Netflix, streaming services are bumping their prices left and right. Budgets for content are being slashed across the board. Disney CEO Bob Iger said they'll be focusing on quality over quantity instead, but we know that Disney benefits much more from a mediocre Star Wars show than a very good original. What was once the golden age of the streaming wars with so many cheap options and incredible original shows being produced has since fizzled out. And it's all because the reality of the business world hit everyone. The issue is that Netflix at its most innovative is also Netflix at its worst, at least for the consumer. This was the case with the new password sharing restriction. Love was no longer sharing a password unless you paid for the extra member who doesn't live with you. As expected, there was a huge uproar for how anti-consumer this was, with so many people swearing they'll drop Netflix. The next wave of it's over for Netflix videos surfaced, but just like last time, it wasn't the end. Quite the opposite, actually. This controversial new feature rolled out in many countries, including the United States, leading to Netflix's surprisingly great subscriber growth in the first half of 2023. But we can't give the password crackdown all the credit, because Netflix's new ad-supported plan also helped a lot. The two of them combined had other streaming services intrigued with the idea as a way to gain growth in this saturated market. And now we have Disney joining in on the fun, who recently announced their password sharing restrictions and will be putting them into effect in November. It's not a big leap of faith to believe that other services will soon follow suit. Netflix reminds me a lot of Apple with their iPhone back in 2016, where they infamously removed the headphone jack. The consumer's disapproval over it was similar to Netflix's password crackdown, and soon after, many other top smartphone companies dropped the headphone jack as well. People eventually came to accept it. Same thing happened when they stopped giving chargers with their phones for environmental reasons, and other companies, like before, followed in Apple's footsteps. I know it's not the same because the password restrictions are much more costly than having to buy a new charger, but it's the idea that with more companies doing it, the original anger surrounding it will eventually die down. Netflix has gotten over this hurdle a lot better than we were expecting, but we're never going to forget which service brought on these restrictions and proved that they could be successful. Content is king. But maybe we have too much content these days. But that's a topic for another day though. The content strategy of a streaming service is vital to its success. That is the end goal, right? To provide content to the user. Each service has a similar yet different strategy. In an ideal world, they'd make the best shows and movies possible and people would join because of them. But that is difficult, expensive, and just unrealistic. Some still try to achieve this, like HBO and their legendary catalog of shows. Others, like Disney Plus, choose to target certain demographics, but then there's Netflix. Netflix puts quantity way above quality. They're producing more original programming in modern Hollywood than any other company, releasing over 700 titles a year. They've gone from being a more luxury store to a Walmart instead, but Walmart is a very well-run business, and it's why this strategy will not only keep them alive, but help them thrive this decade. So first, let's go over their approach to foreign markets. Netflix is very dominant in the global market, and none of its competitors come even close. Their approach early on was to locally produce TV shows and films in other countries, but to always target the global or broader audience with them. It made sense to have a safer strategy because they were busy expanding to almost 200 countries. But as an established service in the last few years with 40 production locations around the world, Netflix has switched to producing locally and targeting the local audience. Netflix wasn't just trying to be the most popular content provider in the world, but instead becoming the most popular within each country. Their chief content officer, Bela Bajaria, said, "We don't make global shows. We make local, authentic shows that are on a global platform." Although the shows are tailored to certain markets, very often they'd still entertain audiences outside of those markets. And when this tailored content becomes a hit internationally, that's when Netflix really strikes gold. This was the case with Squid Game, which became Netflix's most watched show of all time, even though it was made for South Korea. We're starting to see some competitors try to break into these global markets using this tailored method, but it will be a long time before they'll be able to match what Netflix has set up. And this is actually why Netflix kind of benefited from the lengthy 2023 writer's strike. With so much talent producing international content unassociated with the Writers Guild of America, Netflix had a steady output of foreign shows and films unaffected, unlike its competitors who had a higher percentage of productions on hold. If Netflix is really lacking in content for the American audience, they can just push one of their foreign products and see if it catches on, just like Squid Game did. We know these strikes will have a delayed impact on the industry in the following year since we witnessed something similar with the 2007 strike. So it's going to be interesting to see how much the streaming landscape will be affected. Another type of content that wouldn't be affected as much is unscripted content, or reality TV. Without much writing involved, the streaming services with a lot of reality TV shows will withstand the writer's strike effects better than the others. And reality TV has been Netflix's bread and butter lately with hits like Love is Blind and Too Hot to Handle. But the success of the reality TV shows isn't something most consumers want to see because it gives them more of a reason to keep making cheaper, eye-catching shows with little risk and a lot of potential. But this is the direction the entire industry will be heading when we say budgets are being cut. Netflix was just early, but soon most services will have their homepages filled with clutter and noise. If services want to be profitable like Netflix, they will start canceling great shows after one season if not enough people watch them. So even though Netflix took the heat for making this transition earlier, people's views of Netflix will only improve over the years as this becomes the norm. And I think that the current films and shows Netflix creates are kind of underappreciated. All those cheaper, attention-grabbing shows are helping fund some pretty great stuff. Their upcoming releases look promising in 2023 with David Fincher's The Killer, Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon, and a reality TV version of Squid Game. But 2024 looks even better with the new 3 Body Problem series in January, a live-action Avatar The Last Airbender show, Monsters The Lyle and Eric Menendez show, and most likely Season 2 of Squid Game and Season 5 of Stranger Things. And while others are cutting costs, Netflix is still making big purchases like the Knives Out sequels for over $450 million or the rights to Roald Dahl stories and characters for $686 million. But there's even more potential in Netflix's catalog this decade because competitors will begin exiting this war or adopting hybrid licensing strategies with their content. Netflix took a huge hit when they began losing some of their popular licensed shows, so getting some of them back would be extremely beneficial for their near-term success. Now, if only they can make better big budget films. Sure, they've been successful so far with watch hours, but we love some higher quality films with those kind of budgets. Netflix's willingness to adapt and plan for the future will also help them have a good decade. They have always favored releasing new seasons of shows all at once, with binge-watching shows being one of their major draws ever since the platform went live. But with the increase of competition these last few years, Netflix began releasing the new episodes of their biggest shows in batches. And we here at FilmStack support this. Splitting seasons into 2 parts extended the interest of their shows by months and helped a lot with subscriber retention. Whether they make the full jump to weekly episodes is kind of hard to tell, but we think they should retain some of their binging roots. If anything, maybe split the seasons up a bit more. I personally enjoy these weekly releases because there is much more room for discussion after each episode than just a giant post-season thread. The other thing Netflix changed their views on was having ads on their service. Even as recently as 2020, they were still against the idea, with the reason being that it would be difficult to compete with companies who are powerful at online advertising and that they wanted to put a focus on customer pleasure and not to exploit the users. But with the rise of their prices, introducing a cheaper ad-supported tier would make the service more affordable without affecting all of the users if they were willing to dish out the extra cash. They aren't the only ones to introduce this type of plan, but they will benefit the most because the stats show that people watch Netflix longer. With these ad-supported plans, it's the active users that are most important for ad revenue, which Netflix gained almost 5 million of them within the first 6 months. And with Netflix, the ads work much better because they continue to have a better reach with their audience after 2.5 hours than other services after just 1 minute. This means that with this plan, they'll get way more ad revenue per user than the other services, where users just go to sample the content. So although being able to binge shows without ads was a staple to Netflix's success, making these slight adjustments will help Netflix a ton in the long run. But the changes don't stop there because Netflix is really trying to set themselves up for the future so they don't have to play catch up later. They began experimenting with live events, finding success in the Chris Rock comedy special. And on the topic of streaming live sports like some of the competitors have been doing, the response was that they'll only do it if they were confident it would make them a lot of money. But they are reportedly planning to live stream a celebrity golf tournament combining the stars of 2 of their shows, Full Swing and Formula One's Drive to Survive. Netflix has also been making some big moves in gaming. With the streaming market becoming very saturated with limited growth, companies are looking elsewhere to grow, such as gaming. Netflix hasn't found too much success just yet with their mobile game offerings, but they're apparently going to have a go at cloud gaming. And they've been hiring for their internal game studio that will be developing a new AAA PC game. It's interesting to see how much will change this decade for streaming services. Netflix is looking to become the clear winner because others are still trying to play catch up, and they're going to be doing everything that Netflix did that originally garnered all of the backlash. The only problem about all of this is that it's not looking too good for us, the consumer. The golden age of the streaming wars is behind us. In fact, the streaming wars are pretty much over. All the services are still participating but not trying to win. The growth and optimism that was once there has severely diminished. And for most services, it's now about becoming more sustainable or just getting out. And that's about everything. Thanks for watching. What do you think the future holds for Netflix? Do you think some other service is going to be the one that comes out on top? Leave your comments down below. Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and make sure to check out our Patreon for more content and some cool perks. And until next time, have a good one.